Batman is a great hero. He protects Gotham from the shadows and is known for never giving up and having a will of iron. But one thing he isn't known for is being a good father. He does have his moments, but for the most part he has continuously lied to the Bat family, purposely withheld information from them, and manipulated them all in one way or another to his own designs. And though he has adopted quite a few orphans over the years, his first orphan was Dick Grayson, and he is the one that Batman has arguably mistreated the most. From spanking him on his birthday once for each year, for no reason other than his own insanity, to having him fake his own death, telling no one but Batman that he is alive, so that his friends and family all grieve and mourn the loss of his passing, and then when he comes back it destroys part of their lives. All because Batman needs him to go undercover, and Batman doesn't really care much about people's feelings, and he's not really that fussed about how they're going to feel about this betrayal. Hence why everyone in the Bat family has such a, shall we say, prickly relationship with him. So needless to say, he's not going to win any Father of the Year awards, and though he has done many terrible things to his adopted sons over the years, this video is going to focus on the 5 worst things that Batman has done to Dick Grayson. Number 5. Forced him to dig his own grave. In the comic book World's Finest, issue 195, Batman and Superman infiltrate the Mafia. Superman's undercover character has to kill Bruce Wayne in order to prove his loyalty to this Mafia, so the two fake his death, and then Superman hides the Mafia's boss at his Fortress of Solitude, and then Batman poses as the head of the Mafia so they can bring it down from the inside. Unfortunately, when they were faking his death, Bruce Wayne hit his head pretty hard, and he goes a bit insane, and he believes that he actually is the head of the Mafia. So he reveals Superman's identity and then uses kryptonite to try and kill him. But Superman is able to convince him that he thinks he's in the Mafia too, and that he is loyal to him. So Batman decides to keep Superman around because he's a great weapon. But Batman also decides that they need to kill Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, and Batman's sidekick Robin, Dick Grayson. So they lure Jimmy and Robin to a junkyard and force them at gunpoint to dig their own graves. And just before Batman kills them, Robin pleads for his life, and his heartfelt speech is able to bring back Batman's memory, and so he doesn't end up killing the two. But still, having your adopted father point a gun at you and force you to dig your own grave just before he's about to shoot you and bury you in said grave, well, that's going to scar anyone for life. And the weirdest part of this story is the fact that Superman just seems to go along with it. He didn't stop Batman from shooting Robin, and if it hadn't been for Robin's heartfelt speech at the last minute, he would have been shot, while Superman just stood there and watched. Now this would be fine if Superman and Robin had planned this speech, but it doesn't come across like that at all. In fact, it comes across that Superman was literally just waiting for them to get shot, and really it was just good fortune that Robin gave this speech when he did. Number 4. He kidnaps him. Frank Miller's All-Star Batman is something special in its own way. It's so bizarre and weird that it comes across as a parody of Batman, though apparently it's meant to be taken seriously. It has Black Canary watch Batman beat up some bad guys and then set them on fire, which turns her on so much that they end up having sex right then and there by the smouldering corpses of his victims. And the weird part is that is far from the strangest moment in the comic's short run. But one of the oddest and one of the worst things about it is the way that Batman treats Dick Grayson. Batman abducts Grayson and tells him that he is now drafted into a war. And much like when the government drafts you into a war, you don't have a choice in it. And he takes him back to the Batcave, locks him inside, and tells him that he has to survive there with no food or water, just what he can find in the Batcave, as food will present itself. So basically, he's meant to eat rats to survive, just as Batman once did. Batman even loses it at Alfred just because he gives the poor kid a hamburger and puts a blanket over him, when really Batman should be grateful that Alfred doesn't call child services on him, because he's not even giving the kid a bed, and it's not as though he doesn't have a mansion filled with beds upstairs. Now this isn't the only version of Dick Grayson's character where he's been kidnapped by Batman, but the way Batman treats him in this is definitely the worst he's ever had while being kidnapped by him. After all, in the other versions, at least he let Robin sleep in a bed and eat cooked meals. Number 3. He kills him. In The Dark Knight Strikes Again, we discover that Dick Grayson was fired by Batman years ago for not being good enough, and this, combined with the training Batman put him through, which as we just discussed was pretty rough, and the death of his family, this all sent Dick Grayson somewhat insane. And so after he left Batman, he undergoes radical gene therapy and emerges with superpowers in the form of a healing factor that is so good that even after Batman chops off his head, he is fine, as Dick Grayson just grabs the head and reattaches it to his body. Now that doesn't really make much sense, but then not much of this comic actually made any sense. And so Batman's only way of killing him, as he has to at this point, as Dick Grayson is trying to kill him, is to open the trapdoor beneath the Batcave and drop him into a boiling lake of lava. Though it does have to be said that this is Frank Miller's version of Batman, who was always pretty murder happy anyway, and the main continuity version of Batman would never do something like this. Or at least I hope he wouldn't. And in the VR Arkham video game, Batman is trying to solve the murder of Dick Grayson.
Beaten to death. Why wasn't I here? Why didn't I stop it?
Only to discover that he is the murderer himself. It's actually quite a confusing game, and you only really know what's going on if you've played the Batman Arkham Knight game beforehand, and even then it's not perfectly clear. But basically, in the Arkham Knight video game, Batman is infected with a virus that is turning him into the Joker.
Untreated, the blood's gestated too long. It's altering them. They're becoming... Joker. My God.
It doesn't really make much sense, to be honest, but it's a great game, so just go with it. But anyway, the whole Arkham VR game playthrough turns out to be a nightmare of what he's going to do when the Joker virus has taken him over fully and turned him completely into the Joker. It's basically his nightmare, his fear of what is going to happen, because the Joker in Batman's body, given all his weapons and his vast wealth that he has, is quite terrifying, because he could quite literally end the world.
Look at me! I'm amazing! And this body! I can't believe how strong it is!
But since this is just a nightmare scenario, technically he doesn't kill Dick Grayson because it is a dream. But at the same time, the game doesn't really make this very clear. Its story is quite oddly finished. It kind of feels like it ends about 10 minutes too early, and it has left many people thinking that Batman has actually killed his adopted son for real. But in most likelihood, he didn't actually kill him. And although using the "it was all just a dream" ending is very cliched, if you haven't played or seen the VR game, then you should definitely check it out, though make sure you've watched or played the Batman Arkham Knight game beforehand, otherwise you'll have no idea what's going on.
The dynamic duo, together at last.
And there is of course the Injustice game's death of Dick Grayson, although this isn't really Batman's fault, as it did happen on a mission with him, but there was nothing he could really do to stop it. After all, when you're on mission, accidents happen.
Every member knows the risks, Artemis. It is not the first loss we have suffered, nor will it be the last.
For the full story of how Dick Grayson did die in the Injustice universe, check out the links in this video's description. Now you may think that Batman killing Dick Grayson is the worst thing that Batman has done to Dick Grayson, but this is comic books, and characters killing each other is not really that big a deal in comic books, because let's face it, they may die, but 6 months later they'll come back to life. So this isn't as bad as number 2. He slept with his ex-girlfriend and he got her pregnant. In the TV show Batman Beyond, Dick Grayson is not present, except for this scene.
Hope you don't mind, found this in the closet upstairs. Way retro. Who's DG?
But other than that, we never see or hear from Dick Grayson at all. All we know is that something must have happened between him and Bruce that had them break off all ties and never see each other again. But we had no idea why. However, that all changed in the comic book Batman Beyond 2.0, in which we learned that the reason they don't talk to each other is because Bruce Wayne slept with his ex-girlfriend, Barbara Gordon, which is pretty messed up in itself, but he also got her pregnant. And then if that's not bad enough, she then unfortunately loses the baby in a miscarriage. All in all, it's a very traumatic event, and for the full story, check out the links in this video's description. But after all this happened, Dick Grayson never wanted to see Bruce Wayne ever again. And who could blame him? After all, if one of your parents hooked up with the love of your life, would you ever be able to forgive them? Let alone if they got pregnant. Number 1. He made him into Robin. Superheroes exist in comics and movies and TV shows, in which the sole purpose of them is to entertain. As such, they aren't meant to be taken too seriously. Namely, they're not made to encourage small children to go outside in a fancy dress costume and fight mentally ill criminals who have knives, guns, and other deadly weapons. Because in real life, the child would be dead in seconds, and if not dead, then they'd at least be seriously hurt and scarred for life. And that's why a person should never let a child be a superhero. It's dangerous beyond reason. And that's why you don't see firefighters and policemen who are children. It's just a bad idea. Especially for the Bat family, who seem to have had more injuries than most superhero groups do. Over the years, Dick Grayson has died, several times as mentioned, Damian Wayne has died, Jason Todd has died, Tim Drake has died, Barbara Gordon has been paralysed from the waist down, Alfred has had his hand cut off, and that is only scratching the surface of the tragedies of the Bat family. And though Robin is one of the most popular sidekicks and superheroes that there are, children still shouldn't become vigilantes. And all the grief and anguish that Dick Grayson has suffered over the years could have all been avoided if he hadn't put on the Robin costume and instead seen a psychologist and got on with his life. Because after watching your entire family die, you probably need some counselling. Now admittedly, in some versions Batman didn't want Dick Grayson to be Robin, but he still never really stopped him from the life, and he really should have at least stopped him until he was an adult. After all, once he's grown up, it's his choice, but until then, he shouldn't have been allowed to be a superhero. Now, in some respects, this may not seem as tragic as some of the other things on this list, but this decision is what led to the rest of this list, and it is all Batman's fault, as he could have helped Dick Grayson to lead a very different life very easily. After all, he's a very rich man, and Dick Grayson is a very intelligent man. Put those two things together and he could have done anything with his life, and he could have had a life free from psychopaths and violence. But unfortunately that never happened, because Batman let him become Robin. And one other thing that bears a mention is the time that he erased Robin's memory and sent him back to the orphanage. Now this is an imaginary novel and not part of the main continuity, but basically what happens is that after Robin disagrees with Batman, who wants to take down Superman, Batman gives him a slap, which is where this infamous meme comes from. And after he slapped him, he put him in a machine to erase his memories, so that he forgot all about being Robin, all about Batman, and all about Bruce Wayne. He basically erased all his memory, apart from the most recent one, which would of course be the death of his family. And if you're going to erase someone's memories, well, let's be honest here, although it's tragic either way, if you had the choice between hearing that your family had died and witnessing their murder firsthand, well, I think it's best to hear they have died rather than see it. You might be filled with regret thinking, oh, I could have done something, but in truth you couldn't, and seeing it firsthand must be so much more traumatic. And slapping Robin and erasing his memory is not only a horrible thing to do to your adopted son, but because of the internet, this little bit of domestic abuse has become one of the most famous Batman and Robin moments. And so because of that alone, it deserves a mention if nothing else. And that is the 5 worst things that Batman has done to Dick Grayson. Do you agree with this list, or do you think that something else should have been on this list instead? And which one of these do you think is the worst thing that Batman has done to Dick Grayson? Be sure to let us know in the comments, and I'd just like to say a quick thank you to those who made this video possible by donating to Needlemouse Productions page on Patreon. Patreon is a crowdfunding site that is helping us to bring you more videos each week and to raise funds for adapting comic book stories into short animated films. If you're interested in donating or just want to find out more, a link is in this video's description. And as always, thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe, share, like, and comment.